Welcome everyone, this time to Kingdom Come Deliverance, where we're returning to the area surrounding Rattay to investigate something rather disturbing. We aren't going to be spending any time in the town itself, as homely as it might be with its tall, comforting stone walls. Rather, we're going to be exploring its woods. At a distance, it just looks like an unremarkable forest, predictable yet majestic, and beautiful but unchanging. However, what if I told you this mesmerizing sea of green, situated but a stone's throw away from the gorgeous town of Rattay, harbors a grisly series of dark secrets, culminating in a disturbing implication? In the woodland to the south of Rattay, I have made a series of grisly discoveries, and I'm armed with just enough information to believe that at least some of them are connected. Credit where it's due, the suggestion to check out the initial location was the suggestion of a viewer. However, what I found while exploring the area further afield were other eyebrow-raising sites and locations with striking similarities, coming together to paint the picture of a serial killer active in the area. But not just any killer. We're looking for somebody with a very particular appetite. So, prepare yourselves as we look into the Cannibal of Rattay woods. As good a place as any to start is the location I was tipped off about, situated here to the southeast of Rattay. It'll be marked as an accident site, but accident doesn't feel like an appropriate word. It's here in the woods where, along a ridge, we'll find a wooden tower. It's 2 stories, nothing crazy, effectively a glorified double-decker hut. Semantics aside, nothing can prepare the stomach for what can be found within. Outside, we can make note of a bloody table with shackles. On the ground floor, if you can call it that considering it doesn't have a floor, corpses. One is wrapped up in a way that seems like preparation for burial. The other body is that of a woman. She hasn't decayed yet, so it's implied she died recently. And if the blood stains on her clothing and around her are any indication, it's very unlikely that the manner of her death was peaceful. On the floor we can find another wrapped up corpse, meaning the ground floor has a total of 3 dead bodies, one of whom shows signs of a violent death, not to mention the other signs of bloodshed here. It is easy to conclude these people are murder victims. What makes this more interesting is, in a sack next to the woman's body, we can find a bandit's ear and a bottle of preserver, which are the 2 things I primarily want you to latch onto. There's also a dagger, some dog lard and offal in here, but bookmark the human ear and the solution for preserving food. Moving upstairs, things get more disturbing again. The scene up here is ever so slightly more bloody. Another woman's corpse lies in a pool of her own blood, in what I assume is a trough on its side, surrounded by various tools that can become makeshift murder weapons and torture instruments. There's also a lit candle, implying somebody has been here recently. The muted tones of the dimly lit room don't bring the extent of the violence to the fore, but under the light of the torch, the bloodiness is clearly immense, and that's highlighted nowhere better than this bathtub, the basin of which is utterly caked in deep red blood. So we have at least 2 young female murder victims, and 2 potentially older victims bagged up downstairs. From that alone we can discern whoever makes use of this hut is up to no good and appears very prolific in the art of murder. But what makes things more disturbing is this book we can find on the floor upstairs. It's a copy of Volume 3 of The Joy of Gutting, a hunting skill book that of course we can't actually read per the game's limitations, but the passage we can read reads as follows. A useful procedure from Poland, where they simply cut around the anus, then after cutting open the abdominal cavity, they continue in the same manner as we do here, except that they then pull the extracted anus through the inside. It's quite alarming when you take into consideration we're surrounded by brutally murdered people. It potentially gives us an insight into the perpetrator. They are gutting their victims like game. The cups and plates on the wall suddenly look a bit more suspicious, as does the cooking pot hidden in the corner there. It makes you wonder, are these people somebody's food? The only flaw in that logic is the corpses seem reasonably intact. The more recent ones can be dismissed. Maybe the killer was disturbed, or perhaps they just haven't got around to eating their victims yet. But the presence of bagged up corpses that are presumably older doesn't seem to track. A cannibal can't eat an entire human body, at least not in one sitting. It would be a race against time while the food slowly loses viability due to decay, which I also imagine explains the presence of preserver to prolong that, even if only somewhat. As for the ear, might that be some kind of trophy? I know it says bandit's ear, but I can't help but feel as if that asset is being used for convenience. In other words, the ear could theoretically be anyone's. Anyway, with regards to this location overall, you get the idea. The label accident doesn't seem to apply. Another detail to latch onto before we move on is offal. Offal is the internal organs of a butchered animal, so for all we know it could be a byproduct of the cannibalism. After all, I don't see any butchered animals here, just butchered people. This within itself is interesting environmental storytelling. But what makes this discovery truly fascinating is that it's not the only one that can be located in these woods.
I feel quite hungry.
Henry, my brother in Christ, now is not the time. So let's have a look at some of the other sites. Firstly, there are many sites in the area that may not be connected but are fascinating just the same. I found an abandoned mine shaft that leads to nothing. I also found a toppled tree wearing shoes. So I'm not going to make the argument that everything in these woods is somehow connected, because there are many things that are just world accenting and Easter eggs. That being said, I did notice these woods were quite bandit-light by comparison to my expectations, yet there was a remarkable abundance of poachers, which makes sense. It is the wilderness. If you're going to sneakily find yourself some game to bag, why not come here? And that poacher's point is worth keeping in mind. A location of note, however, situated far to the northeast of the previous accident site. Just on the edge of the woods we can find another one. Here outside a shack by a fire we'll find a fresh corpse. The man is clutching a bottle of poison, which makes it doubly curious that he's covered in blood. Bleeding from nowhere in particular isn't the typical side effect you would expect from a poison. However, the man is out at a cabin in the woods, withdrawn from broader society. His cabin has some particular finds within that might suggest he's a hunter, so it's entirely possible he's covered in not his own blood, but I couldn't find any recently gutted animal carcasses around to confirm that. Otherwise, the only things of note are the stew cannot be eaten from, and the fire is still lit, implying the man passed recently. Considering the non-specific origin of the blood, the poison could very well have killed this man. But in his home, I noticed he's in the possession of some money and treasures. He's doing okay. So it's very tricky to establish the whys of this scene. There were some sacks in the house, and to confirm, they cannot be searched. So there's nothing necessarily linked to that other eerie cabin. So perhaps the greatest detail to latch onto is the abundance of death that seems to dominate this forest. Situated a short hike to the southwest of this discovery, we can find a poacher's camp. There are signs of recently gutted game, so there's a partial explanation for the bloodstains on the ground, but that doesn't necessarily explain why the interior of the tent is covered in it too. Yes, you can sleep and save here if you like sleeping on a bed of blood. From this camp, there is a trail of blood that leads to a grave, where a wrapped-up body lies unburied in a hole. It would seem somebody was killed up at the camp. Their body was wrapped up and taken down here to be disposed of. Foul play is clear in this instance. Corpses don't tend to bury themselves, nor do they cover themselves up in a way that you would expect a corpse to be covered up and then jump in a ditch, and the presence of blood suggests a violent end. This individual was most likely a bandit or poacher, but somebody out there felled them, and appears to have done so with a savage ferocity. In the sack at the tent I found some hunting equipment confirming what we already know about the vocation, if you will, of whose camp it was. As for its connection to the cabin, it's the abundance of blood that raises my eyebrow here. Not to mention bodies wrapped up like this can be found in the cabin too. That being said, it is a generic model. Now, on the topic of corpses, there are many in these woods. Not all of them, I believe, are related. The bloke under the tree wearing big stompers, for instance, I doubt is somehow related to this. There are also a couple of hanging victim sites. This one was hanged and dropped into a grave where he dangled. And on the other side of the woods, there's a guy still hanging from a tree. Neither fit the bloodied profile we are building. I also found a grave not far from that second hanging victim that, once dug up, reveals the remains of 2 individuals. They are only skeletons, so it's impossible to determine how they died, but it's interesting how there's a lot of death here. If you're still not satisfied that the concentration of death is denser in these woods than anywhere else, I petition to draw your attention to this site where I uncovered a mass grave. Here we can see the remains of a few poking out from under disturbed mud. There's a chest here, though my lock-picking skill at the time was too low to open it, so apologies, feel free to let me know what you found within. I can't find any mentions of this site online, not that I necessarily know what to look for. But even if this eerie site is not related, it's a hell of a coincidence for there to be such an abundance of death around every turn in this forest. That's especially fascinating when you realise there don't actually appear to be much in the way of life signs. For humans, anyway. There's the odd general poacher, but nothing descript. Every structure you can find in these woods is either full of corpses or seemingly abandoned. Wooden shacks are simply left to fall into disrepair. It's like everybody who once inhabited the area chose to leave. And if they didn't, well, like this site here, the remains of who presumably once occupied a place can be seen displayed almost like a ghostly warning. The Rattay woods are haunting and eerily quiet. Perhaps it's due to folklore that nobody lives here, or maybe it's the product of a certain someone's activities. Either way, it's the perfect place to take your corpses and scran them because your witnesses are limited to the dead and animals who can't talk. As for the odd poacher or bandit, they aren't exactly eager to make themselves known to the authorities. So if you were a cannibal and you wanted to remain as clandestine as a cannibal could be, why wouldn't you bring your victims here to eat them? It's secluded, yet not far from where people live. So there's a surplus of potential prey. Risk would still naturally be high, but provided you trick your target into the woods, it would be significantly mitigated. Anyway, there is one location I can conclusively say is related to that cabin. But as you can see, night has fallen. We must sleep. Fortunately, there's a sleep and save spot not far from the woods, at a cabin that is the site of an accident. As you can see, this man probably drank himself to death, so I'm not gonna get caught up tying him into the mix. It is nevertheless fascinating there are so many dead people just lying around. Now that we have the benefit of daylight, the time has come to venture back into the sticks and find this other site. It is situated a short walk southwest of the initial site we investigated, and it's at this spot that we will find another camp, not dissimilar to the camp we found earlier. It's bloodied and the tent is similar to the previous one. There's also the chance that a poacher will be present at this site, which was also a possibility at the previous camp. Now, poachers are territorial, they will try to warn you away. Since I need to stay here, this guy's just gonna have to take a sword to the stomach, freeing us to investigate the camp where, in the stew, we will find bones that don't appear to belong to an animal. There's a human skull in here and forearm. It looks delicious, I'll tuck in right away, sir. So somebody at this site, possibly the poacher we just life-deleted, has been cooking up a human stew. However, it's also possible to arrive at this camp and have a poacher not spawn, so it's entirely likely whoever's stew this is cannot be found. No matter, cannibalism at this site at the very least is confirmed. I'd imagine you're probably wondering two things. Firstly, why is the smoke doing that? I don't know. Presumably a bug. And second, while the potential link to the other camp might be established, what's the connection with the cabin? Well, dear viewer, I am very glad you asked. You see, beside the fire there is a chest we can unlock. In doing so, we will open the chest to observe some familiar findings. In this chest, we will find a human ear and a bottle of preserver, frighteningly similar to what can be found in the sack at the cabin. I suppose there might be some weight behind my trophy theory after all. With that alone, I feel the link is solid. However, there is more to be found here. From the camp, there is a short trail of blood that will lead us to a grave. Once this grave is dug up, we will find yet more human remains, including what appear to be skulls and a hand in a basket, a ribcage and a third skull. Along with them, yet another sack that looks similar to the one found in the cabin that had an ear and some preserver in it. What are the chances that this one has an ear in it as well? You want to hazard a guess? You'd be correct. Absolute. Somebody has a depraved ear collection. Not that that's the worst hobby I've learned the existence of this week. So at this site alone, we have 2 instances of finding human ears along with a bottle of preserver, some other odd bits and a dagger hidden in either a container or a sack. This very particular assortment is not only pretty easy to identify, it reasonably matches with the findings at the cabin, definitively linking 2 sites at least to this cannibalistic serial killer, confirming a minimum of 8 victims, 4 in the cabin and at least 4 here. If we loop in the 1 corpse at the previous camp, that gives us 9, so that gives us a reasonably high minimum number of victims. But considering we've established this individual, or group of individuals, are cannibals, what are the chances the true count is much, much higher? The question we're left with is, who's behind this? Could it be the poachers we can sometimes find at these disturbing camps? Or are they just incidental spawnings? Considering the population of this woodland appears to be mostly poachers, it's important to question why they haven't looked elsewhere to bag some game. They could be taking advantage of a local's apprehensiveness towards going into the woods, but at the same time they are still human, flesh, bone, blood. They too would be on the menu. Unless, of course, the poachers were the ones poaching people too. Let's look at things from a logical perspective. Poachers are the dominant population in the woodland. They are capable hunters of animals, and that skill does translate. If you can drop a deer, you can drop a man. Preparing the remains into food after the fact would be even easier. So perhaps the Rattay Woods is home to a poacher who has expanded his prey. Or maybe there's an entire group of them. The game doesn't go into too much further detail about it, but it is interesting that poachers can spawn at these murder sites and still be more preoccupied with our presence. At the same time, they behave the same way as any poacher in this game. They are entirely nondescript within that category. They drop an abundance of food items when killed, but that's to be expected. Their involvement either as individuals or as a whole is tricky to determine. It's also difficult to figure out if there's any awareness of these fun, woodland activities beyond the boundary of the woods. There is a mill inhabited by an elderly man just outside the woods, and he's less than hospitable to say the least.
Is there a fire? No? Well, bugger off then!
But people can be grumpy for a series of reasons, not least because assholes exist. So while I could fashion a potential explanation that he's cautious of people being too close to the woods, I think it's equally as likely, if not more so, that he's just cautious and outright distrustful of outsiders. As you can guess, there's no formal quest line to tie all this together. We are to either accept the poachers in the woods are the ones eating people, or live with the knowledge we can never find them. And that's a very uncomfortable feeling. Nevertheless, I decided to scan further afield to see if I could locate other sites that might indicate the consumption of human remains. This search brought me to a cave north of Merhoyed, the exterior of which displays a human skull on a post. As for inside the cave, we can find lit candles implying human presence recently, an abundance of bowls, and human remains, topped off with a bowl of entrails that may once have been within a person or an animal. It is not clear. There are animal remains here too. However, were I looking for a connection, I would be looking for a sack with a human ear inside and a bottle of preserver. Also, situated in the woods to the west of Ujits, we can find what appears to be an abandoned bakery. It's a bit of a strange spot. I find it difficult to believe a bakery could thrive here. But no matter, in the oven we can find human bones. Of course, it's a Hansel and Gretel Easter egg. In this German fairy tale, two siblings, Hansel and Gretel, are abandoned in the middle of the woods, where they encounter a witch who lives in a hut made out of sweet-baked treats, who intends to eat them. To cut a long story short, they defeat the witch by pushing her into her oven, and that is precisely what we see here. So I would say, on the basis that it appears to be a standalone Easter egg, it's unlikely to bear connection. I have seen occasional murmurings of other cannibal-like sites, but I myself have been unable to track them down. There are a few interesting discoveries around Vranik, such as a man shot full of arrows in the basement of a dilapidated structure whom we cannot loot, or a couple seemingly murdered on the road. But this area has plenty of bandit activity. Finding corpses with no valuables on them is to be expected. As for the good people of Rattay, they seem totally oblivious to what's going on in the woods just south of their town. I could find no mention of anything to do with it. Even the huntsman, whom you'd expect would spend plenty of time in the woods, has nothing to say about it. It would seem either nobody likes to talk about the cannibals in the woods, or nobody knows they are there to begin with. So whoever either is or was out here, chances are pretty good we'll never find them. Unless, of course, it was the poachers. With that, I bring this video to its conclusion. I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends, all that wonderful stuff. It would be massively appreciated. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on the cannibals in Rattay Woods, or let me know anything I might have missed. There is a pretty high chance. Furthermore, if you fancy joining us over on our tiny, modest Discord server, be sure to follow the QR code on screen now and get involved. You would be more than welcome. Beyond that, with any luck, I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point, but until next time, please take care, and goodbye.